May I now request Mr. Deepak Shetty, Senior Advisor, Maritime Anti-Corruption Network India, to address our audience.
Thank you very much. Captain Tushar Pradhan, Captain Manish Kumar, MS Saleha Sheikh, Mrs. H.K. Joshi, distinguished members of the audience, and above all, the next generation of seafarers that I see bringing up the rear of this room. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute delight and privilege to be here amidst all of you this morning to share a few perspectives and insights, having earlier served as Director General of Shipping and also as Secretary to the Government of India. But at the outset, I think it's in the fitness of things that I must compliment women who are out here in person as well as those in absentia. We need to celebrate on this occasion, and kudos to the MUI as well for setting up a women's wing. I believe it's one of its kind, perhaps the only organization which has an embedded in-house vertical dedicated for promoting the interests of women. And I think it's just as well. Let me be a bit of a skeptic and a naysayer here. How often we've had these, pardon me, this is not to disparage anyone, not to run anybody down. We've had occasions like this year in and year out. We come and sort of, if I may put it in the Indian lingo, we preachify, we say that we need to do this, X, Y, Z. But come next year, do we sort of look back, step back and say, where are we? Have we progressed? My sense is that I think there is a fair bit of status quoism, and I don't want this to attribute to anyone in particular. I think it is generally got to do with the mindset. I think the hardest and the most exponentially difficult proposition to do is to bring about behavioral change. And this reminds me of economic theory, which is the nudge theory. I don't know how many of you have heard of this. Dr. Richard Thaler, he won a Nobel Prize in economics in the year 2018. He teaches in the Chicago Booth School of Business in the United States of America. His proposition is fairly simple, that in public policy, if you want to sort of persuade, dissuade people, bring about a tangible change, then you need to keep nudging, which means you need to keep persuading. And this is a long drawn process. What I would urge is that please keep at it, but at the same time, it's just not adequate that at the end of the proceedings today, you wind up and go back on a positive note. Please draw up measurable, tangible, deliverables. Do map it out, do a gap analysis, and come up with specific recommendations where you can work in terms of an actionable plan. Because that's the way you will be able to take this process forward in concrete terms. Let's look in terms of how arduous or challenging getting women into the mainstream is. Quote unquote, the United States of America, supposedly the most advanced, mature nation, the beacon of hope for democracy, liberalism, human dignity, and what have you. How many of you are even aware that it was only in 1960, the US independence goes back to 1774. The United States of America celebrates its 248th year of independence. I had the good fortune of being there in a function which they invited me to. The universal suffrage, which is the right of women to cast votes and decide their own destinies, in the US came about only as late as in 1960. Can you even believe that? And things progressed, but what do you have? If those of you who follow the US political landscape now, there is a very serious pushback where there are certain states, and I don't want to derogate anyone here, they are trying to negate this very right of women people of color, and all of that. On the other hand, you've had a trend of DEI. This is the much bandied, touted term, diversity, equity, inclusion. If you go to the US campuses, the much touted Ivy Leagues and the like, those of you who watch television, podcasts, etc., would get to see the horror stories that are emerging, where DI is fine. I think you need to take it forward because you need a far more inclusive mainstreaming to happen. But at the end of the day, if you take DI in absolute terms and try and become an advocate, dare I say, for nihilism, which is you try and say, I want to swing back and do pretty much everything exactly opposite on 360 degrees, then that's a recipe for disaster. And that's precisely the agenda which a lot of faculty members and student groups in the campuses of the United States, in many of these very, very so-called, very fabled universities, are now up against. They are having a movement which is now virtually gone out of hand. So there is a serious rethink. And I don't know how many of you even heard of a term called wokeism. In the US, this is the new concept, wokeism, which means that you suddenly have a trend which is very, very adversarial, and then you don't know how to really cope up with it. So we need to be mindful of some of these sensitivities as we navigate our path ahead. But having said that, on a positive note, we've had universal trends, corporate trends which are emerging, such as ESG, environment, social, and governance, which carries forward this very messaging and inclusivity. And governance is, and if you really want to propagate the message of good governance, you really need to have women who constitute about 50% of the population as part of the discourse as well as decision making. That's a no-brainer. You also have the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, 2015 to 2030 of the United Nations. I'm sure most of you have heard. There are 17 goals, there are 269 targets out of that. There's a wish list which the world, 193 member states of the UN have mapped out for themselves. But if you look back between, both, if you want to retrospect and introspect, from 2015 when the SDGs came about till now we are in 2024, and we just got another 6 years to go before these SDGs wind up. I'm not too sure as to how much of progress we have made in tangible terms, in terms of delivering outcomes for women. So the bottom line is that while we want to keep nudging, persuading on a long haul process, we need to create an ecosystem, and which means that there are building blocks which constitute this ecosystem, where you have, on a public-private partnership mode, you have policy planners, you have stakeholders, and you have the next generation who need to be part of this process, because at the end of the day, if this is a long haul, then clearly it is the next generation which is in the offing, which needs to have as much say and a participatory mode. So I think catch 'em young, as the saying goes. You need to tap into maritime training institutions, have this as a force for change driven from there, and get everybody on board. You can keep on pontificating here. Now let me just come to, because there was a reference to zero tolerance that Captain Pradhan alluded to. Truly, zero tolerance is of course a buzzword. It's, one can keep speaking about it. Zero tolerance to what? Zero tolerance to essentially human behavior, which is very adverse in nature. And that's exactly the strand which the organization which I currently represent as senior advisor and head of India operations, the Maritime Anti-Corruption Network. Lest there be a misconception, this is not an NGO. This is a global, not-for-profit maritime industry association set up by the industry. Today, it's a force for good, recognized by the IMO, and it has 205 member companies, who constitute about 56% of the global shipping tonnage. essentially the MACN drives the message of zero tolerance to corruption across the maritime and logistics value chain network. Of course, given the bandwidth and the current mandate and the resource availability, the MACN is today confined in its activity portfolio to pushing back against, in real terms, against corruption in the interface on the sea side between ships, companies, and agents on the one hand, and the public sector agencies such as customs, immigration, port health, port administrations, maritime administrations, and what have you. We have been in India for about 22 months, and I must say this with humility, that we've had a 100% success rate in all the 34 cases that have been reported to us, where we have succeeded in, just to give you a sample, a flavor, 34 is not a humongous number. By no reckoning do we ever claim that everything is hunky-dory. Surely not, because the challenge of corruption is humongous, and I think you need all hands on the deck, as it were. But of the 34 cases that have come, and I keep saying this in a lighter vein, we in MACN don't have a crystal ball where we can gaze and figure out all that's going wrong on the corruption landscape across the country. Whatever is reported to us, we get back, and I mean it, within 4 to 5 hours, we seek a resolution. In that span, what we have done is we have got cases of corruption, monies, bribes extorted, $1,800 to about $4,000, returned back to the master in totality, in 4-5 hours, with an apology tendered. In a couple of cases, departmental disciplinary action initiated against the officers. In a few other instances, the officers have been transferred out of the ports and administrative grounds. So there is a contagion effect in terms of an impactful outcome. Also happy to share with you that, sorry, I think I need to be mindful of the time. Yeah, I think I'll just wind up in a couple of minutes. But I would also, I would urge you that please open this floor for a quick Q&A if you have the appetite for it. The other thing which we do very consciously in MACN is where I think even women seafarers have, the why I wanted to propagate this is that this is an this is an avenue which is open even for women seafarers, just as much it is for the male counterparts. So if you have an issue in terms of a corrupt practice which is perpetrated and you're at the receiving end, please feel free to reach out. Our coordinates are available on our website. The moot point here is that apart from negating and pushing back, we've also ensured in every one of these 34 instances that the sailing window of the vessel was never missed. Not one instance where, so we monitor it extremely closely, ensure that the vessel sails out in the window of time that is assigned to it. So notionally, if you ascribe, let's say, $10,000 to $15,000 of an average delay, ballpark figure of cost, transactional cost for that delay, I think we can take a small pride in saying that we've been able to save close to about $435,000 USD in our India operations in these 34 cases for member companies in tangible terms and outcomes. We have also, as a conscious measure, we have ensured that we try and introduce business process re-engineering changes, systems changes, where we recommend to the government specific steps of low-hanging fruits which can redress the areas of corruption. And 2 policy changes which I had drafted and recommended to the government. One is to do away with port clearance system on a paper basis. I believe it's been accepted and it is getting merged into the National Logistics Portal come the end of this year. Likewise, another systems change that I had recommended and which has again been accepted is to do away with the practice of multiple agencies seeking information from companies and other stakeholders offline at different points in time, and have one agency at the front end seek it on an electronic basis and disseminate on a need-to-know basis. So this is an agenda which we want to drive the change. The other thing which we are also working is to try and ensure that the routine boarding of customs officers is done away with. So that's something which I'm working on, basis the best practices which we're trying to cull out from globally. And hopefully we will get there by doing away with it, subject to the caveat that on a sovereign function basis, on a specific intelligence, if there is a need for a customs officer to board, by all means, for sure, he needs to board. But otherwise, it has to be very selective. That's our aim. So this is a constant endeavor. We also have about 108 emails that have come in from masters of different vessels, acknowledging that progressively in the past 22 months, courtesy their interaction with MACN India, things have started looking up. I'm again saying that it's not, it's not Ram Rajya as yet. It's not an ideal world, but I think we need to keep getting, pegging at it and keep getting there. One can go on. This is not a session which is intended on the MACN, but I just wanted to give you a few broad strands of information. I don't have much to say, and all I can wish all of you here, particularly the women force, is that Godspeed to you, and may you have all the power that is required. But above all, I think you need the respect and the recognition that you are a person, as an individual, as well as a collective group, eminently deserving of that respect, and that you should be part of the decision-making process, and which is how we will have a far more inclusive and participative society. With this, I convey my very best wishes to all of you here, both on the personal and professional fronts, and to the MUI, my grateful thanks for extending this invite to me and to spend a few moments of my time, and hopefully some of these insights are meaningful. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good day to all of you. Thank you.